put time allocation. And, when you, of course, a lot of people don't use a calendar. I live and die by a calendar.
Got to.
But if you look back at your calendar and, I'm like, this scares me because I know that I'm not a stellar example. This is the disaster behind the scenes. But when you look back at your calendar, or if you don't keep a calendar, if you look back and you're honest with how you budget your time, that shows what you value and what you're characterized by.
Yeah, I on a regular basis try to reevaluate my priorities. In fact, it was mentioned before we started here tonight, and it's so crucial that you do that. And I encourage everybody, and the Apostle Paul mentioned that he died daily. Obviously, it's a very short saying, but what I think he said in that passage was so much. But one of the things was that daily he was reevaluating his priorities.
Right.
Daily he was making sure things were in the right order. And if they weren't, he didn't have any issues with recognizing that and changing those things. And so we all have to be that same way with our lives too. And I've recently in fact today, this morning in prayer, I'm praying about things, a lot of stuff going on, and I really felt God check me and say, I think your priorities are a little bit out of whack and they need to be reevaluated. And so some tough decisions have to be made, but the kingdom comes first before all things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so even if you are doing something that you think is for the kingdom, but if it's taking away from, and we talked about this in another podcast, but if it's taking away from your relationship with God, your relationship with God comes first. And in actuality, the stronger you are in your relationship with God, the more benefit you are for the kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it gives you that foundation and that character we're talking about.
Yeah. So if you have to take your priorities and kind of change them around a bit, and you thought, this one thing I was doing was for the kingdom, but it was taking away from your relationship with God, and it's like, okay, God has to be number one priority, so that thing I was doing has to go to the back burner for now so I can make sure that my relationship stays strong. And until I can get to the place where that can all be together, where I can still have a strong relationship, and that thing I was doing before can still happen, then you can go and do it. But until then, you got to put God first before all things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in our Sunday school, I think that we are kind of known. Well, now I guess kind of around the nation, just because different people we've been able to connect with. But we're known in Sunday school realm, in the apostolic Sunday school realm, as like we have cool sets.
Yeah.
And we do, and I think it's nice to be known for something like that. It's fun and everything. But I want to be careful that that's we're not just characterized by that.
Right.
So much the better if we're characterized by kids getting the Holy Ghost. And that's a benchmark we've talked about before on the podcast, where it's not just about how many receive the Holy Ghost, what's the number, but where we are characterized by even not flashy. I don't know, that sounds bad when you're talking about the Holy Ghost, but when you're characterized by just discipling kids,
right?
There's some of those things that are not like, it's not a number. It's hard to quantify,
right?
But years later, that's where it quantifies.
100%. And I know you, at the end of the day, if we are compromising God by having these things up, these really awesome sets of lights, you would take it all down.
Absolutely.
And we would go back to the basics because we want God to be at the center of everything. That's our main priority, is teaching kids about who God really is, and teaching about how to be saved. And if for some reason somehow that gets lost because we're prioritizing all this other stuff, that would go on the back burner until we can make sure our priorities are straight. In fact, when we build these sets, yes, they do take a lot of time, but we don't allow that to get in the way of other things. So like during Heart of Christmas, because that's just a big part of our outreach, and we really focus on that because it's a big part of our church, we tear the set down and we go without it for a while.
It's about to come down.
Yeah, because we have priorities, and one of our main priorities during this time of year is Heart of Christmas, because it's such a major outreach to our community. Yeah. And so that's just another thing. Like in Sunday school, sometimes you do have to reevaluate your priorities in your Sunday school and make sure they're in the right order.
Yeah, make sure and going back to even what you were saying about your relationship with God is, I think even as Sunday school teachers and Sunday school leaders, when we're working with these kids, we have to say, okay, so is my time spent just on Sunday or Saturday night thinking about this? Is my time just like, if we're looking at our time allocation, is it just on Sunday when we show up, okay, here I am, I'm ready to go on stage? Or is there, we use the word burden, like passion. Is there a passion or a burden in our heart for these kids, for our Sunday school that we're trying to minister to and have a ministry through, instead of just, having all these other things that we do, so it's before we get there on Sunday that matters. That's the foundation. And then I just talked about it recently that with, I think it was Brother Matthew, is Sunday's our spotlight moment. But we got a lot of work to do before we get there.